All right, good evening once again, everyone. I'm Lauri Leadley, the founder and president of Valley Sleep Center. I'm here with Dr. Paul Lynch. We have both survived COVID. And one of the things that I found so inspirational about you, Dr. Lynch, is that you went to New York City in April to help people in the ICU. I remember you getting COVID and you telling us, and I was so afraid at the time because I have a lot of autoimmune problems. I've had cancer twice. I text you, Dr. Lynch, can I beat this? And you said, yes, you absolutely can. And I am here to tell you guys that I just survived COVID. I think I'm on day 22 or something like that. My doctors are super aggressive with some of my treatments, and I thought, who better to invite to do a webinar talking about COVID, prevention, treatments, all the things. We're still like in the middle of this, right, Dr. Lynch? I mean, can you give us all some hope for 2021? Thank you for joining me tonight.
Lauri, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for surviving. I was really nervous for you. We've kind of been texting the last couple of weeks, and I know you have kind of a complex history, and I know you talk about a lot with your cancer diagnoses and everything. I think you're unbeatable. We can't kill you. Cancer can't get you, and COVID can't get you. And I'm very happy. I was really worried for you. And I know you were worried to get the coronavirus, and you got pretty sick, right? I mean, even before you got treated with the monoclonal antibodies, you were feeling pretty bad, weren't you?
Yeah, it was so interesting because I decided to make you my pain doctor because I've had 2 back surgeries. And of course, the morning I'm supposed to drive to Scottsdale to see you on the 21st, I wake up with a fever. And so we switched to telemedicine, which was so cool. And you were like, oh, hey, we're doing rapid testing here. So right. my husband and my 31-year-old son, he's a doctorate student. We all, got in the car and got tested at Dr. Lynch's rapid testing center. And so that was kind of the beginning of how we figured it all out. But yeah, it was, I'm excited to have you on my team now as not only my friend and colleague, but as my physician that's going to be managing my pain, which has been really interesting because pain is such a part of COVID as well.
Yeah. No, everyone's telling me that. I've heard back pain. I've heard headaches. I've heard, chest pain, all sorts of pains that come along too. Well, I appreciate you, kind of sharing your story, and I'm so happy that we made it through it. So I think I'm actually going to start with your treatment and end with your treatment because you had such a cool treatment. You had almost exactly the same thing that the president had, right? You had monoclonal antibodies infused through an IV that basically showed your body how to fight this virus. And I say almost the same, the treatment that President Trump got was called Regeneron, which was monoclonal antibodies. And I looked at your IV bag, you got the product from Lilly, which we all call Bam Bam because we can't pronounce it.
Bam Bam.
Right. And so you were feeling terrible and you got the infusion, you got better within 24 hours. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, I mean, that makes me so excited as a physician because when I was in New York City, we were dreaming about this and talking about this, and you heard about convalescent plasma or antibodies or how could we do this? And so we talked about, we didn't have it. Now we have it, and to be able to see cases like yours where you got better makes me really excited. Now there's some hurdles and there's some issues, and we're going to go through some of that later, but at least wanted to start it with what you got done is super cutting edge science. And it just kind of shows us, in medicine, like what's possible.
I'm a risk taker.
Well, it was pretty exciting. So I'm going to come back to that at the end. So I'm going to try to share my screen, and I want you guys just to tell me if I'm doing this.
And while you're sharing your screen, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. And when Dr. Lynch is done, we will get to your questions. If you're on Facebook, put your questions and we'll get to them later. We can see your slideshow. Thank you, Dr. Lynch.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to be like 10 minutes, which I've literally never been able to do in my life because I just talk and talk and talk, but maybe 15. I'm going to talk and just give, what I want to do is I want to hit 4 things today, Lauri. I want to talk about what you can do prophylactically to keep from getting COVID. Then I'm going to talk about if you get COVID, what can you do if you have a mild case? And then what if you get COVID and you have a moderate case? You were somewhere between mild and moderate, probably closer to moderate, it sounds like. And the way we define it, it probably didn't feel mild or moderate to you. but we consider severe, for example, when you're in the ICU, like at death's door. And so we usually consider moderate once you're hospitalized, and mild is pretty much anyone who hasn't been hospitalized. So, so number one, how you can keep from getting COVID, then mild cases, call it you're at home treating yourself, moderate cases, you've been hospitalized, but not in the ICU yet, and then severe cases. And what I want to do is take a very evidence-based look. And so, and when I talk about evidence, it's tough because we're talking multiple randomized placebo-controlled trials that have shown the same thing over and over. There's not a lot of things that have great evidence. And so even the monoclonal antibodies that you got, there's been one big study which was incredibly beneficial, but the NIH still doesn't even recommend it as like saying this is a standard of care yet because we need more info. We know anecdotally, like for you, it worked amazing. For the president, it worked amazing, but we still just want a little bit more data. Okay, so I just want to lead with, we are number one in the world again for Arizona. We have the highest 7-day per capita death rates in the world, or sorry, cases and deaths right now. We reported 335 deaths today, Lauri. And so I actually posted on Facebook today to say we are at the peak. All the mathematical models say we're at the peak. And then depending on if you're a glass half full or a glass half empty person, being at the peak can be good or bad. It's good because we're going to start getting better from here. We can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's bad because we're like the peak of the whole world right now. 335 people dead in Arizona alone is really, really terrible. I'm not going to belabor that, but just wanted to point it out for people. This is the confirmed cases in Arizona, and you can see it just really spiking today. The actual spike in cases was 2 weeks ago. It was on Christmas Eve. I'm sorry, it's not true. In Arizona, it was the day after Christmas. For the entire United States, we peaked on Christmas Eve. And so we're about 2 weeks beyond the peak of cases, but the peak in deaths are just hitting right now. I just want to continue to remind people, there's probably 5 things you can do to keep yourself or others from getting COVID. Number 1, wear a mask. Number 2, socially distance. Number 3, wash your hands. Number 4, get the vaccine when it comes out. And then number 5, if you suspect at all that you might have COVID, get tested, which is what you did, Lauri. We talked that morning, you said you might have it. I said, come on in, get tested. You got tested, your whole family got tested. And then what that allows you to do is rapidly stop exposing other people to the virus. So just remember that those 5 things you can do can save other people. I do want to just mention the vaccine that's out there, Pfizer and Moderna trials both showed 95% reduction in your risk of contracting symptomatic COVID. That means you can still get COVID, by the way. So even if you get vaccinated, you should still wear your mask. You can still get COVID. You can still conduct it to other people, contract it to other people, but it's going to reduce your chance of getting a bad case by 95%. Let's go into prophylactic treatment. So number 1, you're walking around, you haven't had COVID as far as you know. What can you do to decrease your chance of getting COVID? Number 1, you can take vitamin D3, 1,000 to 3,000 units per day. Number 2, you can take vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams twice per day. And all these guidelines are on the NIH COVID treatment website, and we can put a link below. I'll send you a link to that, Lauri, and we can put it like in this. But the NIH has gone through the data on every single vitamin and supplement and said, these are the big 5 that help you. So quercetin, 250 milligrams per day, zinc, 50 milligrams per day, and melatonin, 6 milligrams before bedtime. These are things that you can do to decrease your chance of getting it. On the second slide, I have a couple things. 1 is some of the studies that prove this, because I always like to back it up with studies. And 2 is a picture of our holistic pain product. And I'm not trying to advertise to people too much, but just to say that we've been working on a pain product that will help people with natural treatment for pain, and realize along the way that the things we were putting in it for pain were the same things that helped you with COVID. It's absolutely incredible. Things like zinc and vitamin D and K2. All these things help not only with pain and people that have back pain or headaches, but it also decreases your chance of getting COVID, which is incredible to me as a pain management doctor. And so we have references for all that. And I'll just tell any of my patients that are watching, we should have this product ready in the next 30 days. We've been working on it for 6 months, and it's a much longer story, but I just want to let you know that some of these things, same things that help with pain, also help with catching COVID.
And
so
we're going to talk more about that Thursday, right? Thursday night at 5:30.
Yeah, exactly. Thursday, we're going to do an entire webinar on how we can use CBD for pain and things like vitamin D for pain. And these natural things are already in the world and are very, very low risk. And what I like about that prophylactic slide is most treatments, there's a risk and benefit of whatever you do. And most of these prophylactic things, there's very low risk. I mean, it's not completely true. If you get too much vitamin D, there can be bad effects with calcium and whatnot. But most of these things are very, very low risk. So what if you get mild symptoms? You're at home and you have COVID, you don't know what to do. I get texts now every day from people, unfortunately. Well, once again, vitamin D is good for mild treatments. Vitamin C, quercetin, zinc. Now aspirin starts to come up. This is recommended by the NIH. You can take aspirin because it thins your blood. And what we know about COVID is one of the pathologies of COVID is it causes blood clots, and that causes problems with your kidneys and your heart and your lungs. And so if you take aspirin, it starts to thin your blood. So that is recommended now, as long as it's not contraindicated, like if you have a bleeding disorder or some other reason you can't have aspirin. And then melatonin actually comes on the list. It's going to help you sleep, and it also can help you with progression of COVID, which we don't completely understand, but the data supports it. I also always tell people to get a home pulse ox. And so a pulse ox looks at the amount of oxygen in your blood. And I used it when I got sick. It was early on. We didn't know all this at that time. I was taking most of this, but I'm holed up in a hotel room in New York, and I just had like the pulse ox on my finger all day because it allowed me to kind of see what was going on with my breathing. And then the other thing is just with just about any illness, make sure you're staying hydrated, that you're taking not just water, but things like Gatorade or Pedialyte or something that's going to replenish the electrolytes that you lose when you're sick and you have a fever. So let's say your disease is progressing, you have moderate symptoms and you're in the hospital. This is the point where you got to trust your doctors, because most people, it's not like you're going to be making the decisions at this point. You're pretty sick and there's other people taking care of you. And so, and I'm not going to go through all the protocols, it gets really complicated, but I want to hit the things that are the most evidence-based here. There's just like three main things. Number one, we put people on steroids. It's just kind of crazy. Early on in the disease, steroids probably make it worse or make you more likely to get it because it suppresses your immune system. But once you have moderate disease and you're really starting to get sick and you're in the hospital, giving patients dexamethasone, is a very specific steroid, decreases the chance of that person getting intubated or going on to the ICU. So this become the go-to standard of care, is putting people on steroids in the hospital. The other thing, they got a lot of attention this summer. They got approved by the FDA, and the data has borne out over several studies, is remdesivir will help you. So it's a medication that affects how the virus replicates. It's not great data. It's not going to decrease your chance by 50 or 60% of dying. But if you're in the hospital, it's going to give you a better chance. I think the last study I looked at was 12 to 15% reduction. So it's not a lot, but remdesivir is statistically associated with better outcomes. And then anticoagulant medications. So the same thing as the aspirin, but now we start doing more heavy duty drugs like heparin to thin your blood so that you don't have clots. Now, let's say you go all the way to the ICU and you're really sick. This is where, once again, you're not in control anymore. So you don't need to remember all this. But now doctors start to use high-dose steroids. Now this is where patients get intubated. We do everything we can not to intubate. I remember early on in March and April and May, all the videos that would circulate around and how the ventilators were killing people. And just there's really not much truth to that. But what we would say is once we intubated, your chance of surviving are very low. And they're better today. Back in the early days, probably 80% of people were dying that got intubated. Now we have better than 50% success, but it's still a very, very bad sign if you get intubated with the coronavirus. So this is where someone like myself can help. Because of my background in anesthesia, we're really good at managing the ventilators and keeping people alive that are really sick. But once you're in that situation, it's pretty bad. I put on their prone positioning. The data shows that if you flip someone upside down, instead of laying on their back, laying on their stomach, they do much better. And so we were doing that in New York, and they continue to do that today. So that's a little bit of overview of what you should do in those four situations. I do want to hit four things that don't work very well, just because you hear it all the time. You see on the internet, you see stuff. One is hydroxychloroquine. I'm not going to get into that. Got very politicized this year. But early studies showed it might work, and then study after study after study after study showed it really does not work, and large trials with thousands of people. So hydroxychloroquine should not be used for coronavirus. And there's really no physicians using that anymore. It's more just people talking about it. Steroids, inhaled steroids, got a lot of attention on the internet this year. There's really no data that inhaled steroids work. There is data showing that if you have a moderate case and you're in the hospital, that oral or IV steroids can help you, but not inhaled steroid like budesonide was one that got a lot of attention. Azithromycin was used a lot this year. It's an antibiotic. it's not helpful against a virus, which is the coronavirus. And there's been no data really to show azithromycin. It kind of got sucked into hydroxychloroquine, where they got used together, and the data really didn't show that worked. Ivermectin is really popular on the internet right now. Everyone's talking about it. Nature actually came out with a long article saying there was some promise in the early studies, but there's been no large studies to really confirm the effect. I would say the ivermectin data is better than hydroxychloroquine, and it still could come out that ivermectin works, but right now there's just not enough data to kind of match the enthusiasm, if that makes sense. I do want to talk about monoclonal therapy, and then I'm going to finish. I think this is one of the most exciting things going on right now in the treatment of coronavirus. Now, keep in mind, the vaccine reduces your chance of getting symptomatic by 95%. That's the best data we have. But for an actual treatment for someone who has it like you that was sick, the vaccine's not going to help you, right? The vaccine, the idea is to give it to your body to prepare yourself to fight it so you don't get sick. But once you have it, the vaccine's not going to help. From everything I've seen, the data on monoclonal therapy is the very best out there. And Krista Gates is our clinical director. We've kind of gone back and forth the last few days, and she's going to help me pull the data. I pulled the large clinical trial just this afternoon and read through all the data, and it showed like a 90% reduction in viral load, meaning how much of the virus was in your blood with people who got the monoclonal antibodies like you got, and 72% reduction in hospital visits for people who were high risk. And so the data was really good. Now, the problem, Lauri, the reason this isn't just widely touted as like the answer is like three things. Number one, it's hard to get this stuff. There's only about 100,000 doses of Lilly out there right now that you can even get. There's maybe 300,000 doses of Regeneron, which is the one that went to the president. So we only have 400,000 doses, and at any one moment, we might have millions of Americans that have the coronavirus. That might sound exaggerated, but it's not. The last couple of days, there's been like 250,000 people a day being diagnosed. But I call it the triple rule. Whatever you see reported, there's 3 times that. So there's actually 750,000 Americans that are getting coronavirus, and they might have it bad in their system for a week. So if you multiply the 750,000 times 7, there's 5 million people walking around that have coronavirus right now that are sick that might need this, and we only have 400,000 doses. So it comes down to, we got to decide who to give it to, and the answer is to give it to someone like yourself, who's immunocompromised, that had a history of cancer, that's had issues that you need help, you know? And so, or we got to kind of debate, like, how many doses do we have and how many people have it today? I will tell you that Regeneron is saying they can make 100,000 doses a month now. So that's a good thing. And both Lilly and Regeneron are both trying to get to 1 million doses on hand over the next 90 days. And so that way we don't have to be so selective in who gets it. So number one, we don't have a lot of it. Number two, it's really expensive. The federal government bought doses so that it's free for people right now. But once that runs out, it's probably going to cost $5,000 or $6,000. So it's a really expensive treatment. And number three is we just have one big study for both companies. Regeneron has one big study, randomized placebo-controlled trial that shows it works. Lilly has one big study. But because the numbers are small, they've got to replicate this to really prove over time that this is the standard of care. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Actually, I'm going to finish and then I'm going to take questions. So in summary, COVID is a complex disease. It attacks multiple systems. There are things we can do to avoid getting it, like staying healthy, being our ideal body weight, boosting our immune systems, taking vitamins. Once we have a mild version, there are things we can do that have been shown to work. And there are really exciting things like monoclonal antibodies that are here, but still need a little bit more research. And we certainly need to deploy it more widely so that it can be the go-to treatment. That is everything I was going to say. It wasn't 10 minutes, but I think I did pretty good.
I think you did great. All right. So if you guys want to chat your questions, here's the first one. I've read things that say not to drink cold liquids while you have COVID. Is this true?
That's not true. Nope, that is a fallacy. There's a lot of things. I spend time teaching on social media because I think it's an opportunity for me to help. And there's a lot of things that have gone around, but there's no reason to believe that that is true. No data for sure.
Should we sleep on our stomachs at home if we have COVID? That's one of the ones I wanted to ask.
No, not necessarily. I think what I would do is I would try to get a pulse ox, and you can probably buy one on Amazon Prime and get it delivered in the morning. And if your oxygen is above 90, then you're probably good. But if you see it dropping, then you can try different maneuvers at home. I tried being on my stomach in New York, and it didn't help me at all. It's more of an advanced maneuver when you're really sick for people that are being ventilated in the ICU. And it has to do with pressure differentials and all that. And I won't get into it now, but it didn't work for me, and I don't think it necessarily would work for you at home.
Someone's asking, what can we do before traveling to Mexico to be safer? I just went to Mexico. Do you have any suggestions for, I mean, I went to Mexico, I went to Cabo, I just came back. Literally, I got back day before yesterday, and everybody wears masks. They're screening everybody at the airport, questionnaires. The rules are very similar to here. So I don't know if you have a comment about that, Dr. Lynch, but that was mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a multi-part question. Number one, the safest thing you can do is not travel. But I saw a study where they were looking at the benefits of alcohol and whether it would be good for heart disease or bad for heart disease. And scientists have gone back and forth for 50 years, and they finally decided that alcohol in no amounts is actually safe. And they asked one of the epidemiologists, and he said, "There's no amount of living that's actually safe, because everything we do has risk." And so the safest thing would be not to travel right now. If you're going to go to Mexico, there's no reason to believe Mexico is any higher risk than here. And so the question is, what's your route of getting there? The safest way to get there would be to drive. And so if you're really looking for a safe way to go, you would drive and maybe go to Rocky Point or something. And you're not going to be exposed to any more COVID in Mexico than you are here. We're like the hotbed of the whole world right now. If you're flying, then now you're taking on extra risk. You're going to an airport where you're near people. Amazingly, being on a plane is pretty safe because of the way the air circulates, but being in a line next to people is a little bit of risk. So long story short is, I think we got to live our lives. And if you want to travel, it's okay. But if you can drive, that's the safest thing you can do.
Is it true that milk has something in it that can be helpful to fight COVID? I haven't heard that.
I've not heard that on the list that I gave you.
Maybe
I guess vitamin D, maybe vitamin D milk. Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, if you get vitamin D milk, that's good. I was thinking about the calcium, and vitamin D milk would probably help you.
All right. So who makes the decision on who gets the monoclonal antibody? Does each state get a number of proportion to the population, or decision is made at the central office? I mean, I know a physician has to order it. There are strict indications of who can get it, and they prioritize based on people that are working in the front lines. Because believe it or not, we have a lot of sick people taking care of sick people, right, Dr. Lynch? I mean, that's what and so we want our doctors and our ICU nurses and our respiratory therapists and people like that getting it first. But I do know that a physician has to order it. So maybe you have a comment on that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple questions. Who gets the vaccine first? Who gets monoclonal antibodies first? And they tend to have a lot of overlap. The vaccine, we're trying to vaccinate healthcare workers first because it stops the spread, one thing, and also because they're out there working every single day and putting their lives at risk, almost like firemen at 9/11. I mean, they're out there doing the work. So for the vaccine, we're trying to vaccinate the elderly, the high risk, nursing homes, and healthcare workers. And for monoclonal antibodies, it's similar, but I just want to make a point. This is not for people who are sick, like severely sick in the hospital. This is for someone with mild to moderate symptoms who's really high risk. As soon as you hear they have it, you give it to them to keep them from getting sick. And so just kind of keep that in mind. One of the great examples would be nursing homes. If there was an outbreak in a nursing home, we could rush in and give everyone monoclonal antibodies. We'd save a ton of lives. If you think about people in a nursing home, I haven't seen the newest data, but it might be a 15% death rate if you catch it and you happen to live in a nursing home. It's super high. So if we gave out 100 doses, mathematically, we'd save, maybe 13 or 14 lives. That's a good use of it. And so there's people doing the math. I don't know how many they've distributed to each state, but you met the criteria when you came in because of your high risk pass, and so that's why you got it. And
you have to get it on a certain day. Like you have to have a positive COVID test, and it has to be given prior to day 10. I think.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think I got mine on day 8. And yeah,
wow.
It took a long time because it was Christmas. Like I got diagnosed on I had symptoms on 21st, then positive test 22nd. And then it was Christmas. And by the time I could get a chair, because again, I wasn't prioritized over physicians and nurses that were, needing it. And then I'm sure even elderly people probably bumped me. And then I got it on like the Monday after Christmas because they weren't giving it over Christmas. Here's another one. Do you recommend any type of treatment or diagnostics after you've had COVID? So when you're recovered, like a chest x-ray or echocardiogram?
Yeah, we're still developing all that. And a lot of the early data basically showed that the systems that were affected is the heart. And so they had done some follow-up chest CTs and showing that a lot of people had myocarditis. The lungs, of course, follow-up chest CTs would show, damage to lungs in COVID survivors. Kidneys can sometimes be damaged. So if you have a mild case, there's probably not much reason to go do further workup. But if you get really sick to the point you get hospitalized, when you get discharged, you'll need to get set up with a good doc who we're going to learn over the next couple of years what happens. We just don't know. It's such an early disease. But probably the organs you'd want to be looking at is primarily your heart and your lungs, and then potentially your kidneys, depending on your medical history.
And then what about this? This is a great question. When can we vaccinate after we've already had COVID? I know I personally have to wait at least 90 days, and my physicians will be recommending, but if you've had COVID, do you have to wait a certain amount of time to get vaccinated?
I didn't look it up today, but the last time I looked, and keep in mind, this isn't a bad thing for science to change over time. I posted some stuff on Facebook today, and one of the comments was, the CDC always changes their recommendation. You can't trust them. But I say the CDC changes their mind all the time. You can trust them because they're constantly looking at the new data, looking at the research and making recommendations. I mean, otherwise we'd still be not washing our hands in the OR and just going in and operating, And so the last time I looked at the CDC, you said you should wait 90 days and then you can get vaccinated. And not just that you can wait 90 days, but you should still get vaccinated because when you get COVID, you have a variable antibody response versus with the vaccine is very predictable. And so after 90 days, you should still probably get vaccinated.
Okay. Does the blood type have any factor or supplemental use for offering protection? Do you know?
Yeah, it looks like from the data, the A positive, which is me, that we definitely have a worse response, but it's small. I mean, it's not like massive, 10, 15, 20%. And I think O negative is the best, but it's small again. So blood type, in the beginning, we thought there was something there and we all looked at it and got excited. And as the data came in, it's a smaller effect than we think.
All right. Are hospitals using high doses of vitamin C and D inpatient as treatment?
I think some are, but I don't think it's their go-to. I think I would say that yes is the answer. They're trying it, but the data is not massive. It's not like what you got the antibodies with like 90% reduction in viral load. It's just going to support you.
Okay. And do you have an opinion about using, I'm not going to say this right, famotidine, propolis spray, lactobacillus spray?
I would say I don't know on 2 and 3 and famotidine. The data was decent, but it's not recommended right now by the NIH as like first-line therapy. But some of the studies did show that it could help a little.
These are great questions. And then how much does asthma have in influencing your risk of contracting the disease?
It doesn't make you more likely to contract the disease. It makes you more likely to have a worse course of the disease. So I have asthma. And when I went to New York, I almost got rejected by the hospital because of my asthma, which made me really nervous. I had to wait for like an hour while I was waiting to see if they were going to even let me in to work. And so I was sitting there thinking like, I don't know if I should be here. But one of the things is asthma, you already have kind of underlying, lung disease. Luckily for me, my asthma is pretty mild and my lungs really weren't damaged. So they let me in. But some people have really severe asthma to the point where their lungs have chronically been damaged. And now when they get the coronavirus, it makes them more likely to get a really severe case.
Yeah. And then does having sleep apnea put one at higher risk?
Yeah, certainly. For the same kind of reason, sleep apnea affects, and Lauri, you know this better than anyone, but it affects your brain and your heart and your kidneys and your lungs. And people don't realize how much sleep apnea kills people. And so sleep apnea is damaging these organ systems that you need to be functioning tip top, and they're not. And so you get the coronavirus and it makes you more likely to die.
Yeah. And your oxygen saturations are decreasing every night, all night when you have untreated sleep apnea. So when you get coronavirus, yes, it puts you at higher risk, but then now you have something else attacking your ability to saturate oxygen throughout your body. So yeah, definitely puts you. And then I think we got one final question and then we can let you go because it is 6:05. What about the vaccine, how long it's going to last? Do you know, is it going to be similar to the seasonal flu shot? Like, are we going to just get this once a year? Like, what are you reading about that, Dr. Lynch?
Yeah, they don't know. And what I tell people is in coronavirus research, we got to get comfortable. We don't know. This thing's only been on the planet for about a year. We've only really been aware of it for about 10 months. But most of the people are talking about this is going to last like 1 to 3 years. And I'm hoping that it's more like 3. It could be 1. I would say if I was going to be a betting man, I would say we all get it maybe every 2 years. but it could be every single year like influenza. But part of that's based on how fast it mutates. There's been some research ongoing already showing that the vaccine is working against this new strain that everyone's been talking about. So at least so far, the mutations haven't led to what's called vaccine escape. And so long story short, I think it's probably every 2 years, but we're going to have to just track the data and see.
Exciting. Someone's asking about diet to recover, like him and his wife are just recovering. You know, they lost weight. I did too. I lost 9 pounds and I didn't have 9 pounds to lose, but guess what? It comes back. But what do you suggest? Is healthy diet?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I would say that I would get a good nutritionist, because there are people out there that, just like you're the expert in sleep medicine, there are people that are like the diet experts in the world. I don't think I'm the diet expert. I would say eat healthy. You know, I mean, I tell my patients to if you've lost weight and you need to put on weight, that's a pretty specific medical condition where I would go to your internal medicine doc and maybe get an appointment with a nutritionist to make sure that you get a diet that makes sense for you.
Yeah, we can help you with that, because we have Rachel is our dietitian that we use. So I would like to close by saying thank you so much, Dr. Lynch. Please join us on Thursday night at 5:30. Dr. Lynch is going to be talking about CBD and its effects on anxiety and sleep. And he has this great new product. So we hope that you can join us for that Thursday at 5:30. I'll do a follow-up email to everybody with the link to register for that. Thank you again so much. Have a beautiful evening, everyone.
Thanks, Lauri.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.